the Texas summer sun was relentless, especially across the sprawling training grounds of Fort Hood Military Base. The heat made the air tremble on the asphalt, and even the most seasoned soldiers sought any available shade during their few minutes of rest. Catherine Reynolds, however, seemed immune to the weather as she calmly walked the perimeter of the training field. At 28, Catherine, or Cat, as few were allowed to call her, was one of the youngest hand-to-hand combat instructors on the base, and certainly the only woman in that role. Her brown hair was always styled in an impeccable military bun, and her uniform, despite the heat, remained wrinkle-free. There was something about Catherine's demeanor that didn't invite casual approaches. Not that she was unfriendly or arrogant, she simply exuded an aura of professionalism that demanded respect. Her green eyes, attentive and calculating, seemed to constantly assess her surroundings, a habit acquired during her 3 tours in Afghanistan as part of the Special Forces. Catherine had an almost mythical reputation at the base. Older soldiers told stories about her combat skills, about how she had neutralized 5 insurgents in a botched operation, protecting her unit with nothing but a knife and sheer determination. But Catherine never confirmed these stories, not even when curious freshmen tried to extract details. To the new recruits arriving at Fort Hood, Catherine was an enigma. Few believed that this woman of average build, weighing no more than 65 kilos, could be the feared hand-to-hand combat instructor that the veterans so respected. It was common for the newcomers to underestimate her abilities, at least until the first class. On that particular July morning, Catherine was checking the preparations for the arrival of a new group of soldiers transferred from other bases. As part of the intensive training program, all soldiers had to undergo her combat assessment, regardless of their rank or previous experience. As she checked her watch, only 20 minutes until the first class of the day. A few miles away, in one of the newly occupied barracks, Sergeant James Matson was finishing adjusting his uniform. Tall, muscular, and with a commanding presence, Matson was the epitome of the American Marine. At 32, he had built a respectable military career, with 2 tours in Iraq and a medal for bravery. He had also built a reputation for a volatile temper and a tendency to resolve conflicts with his fists rather than words. His transfer to Fort Hood hadn't exactly been voluntary. After an incident at his previous base involving a fight with a superior officer, Matson received an ultimatum: either accept the transfer and the intensive disciplinary retraining program, or face a court-martial. His wounded pride still throbbed, but he knew he had no choice. Who the hell do they think they are, sending me to this hellhole in the middle of Texas to learn to control my temper? He muttered to himself as he adjusted his uniform belt. 12 years of impeccable service, and because of a single misunderstanding, they treat me like a rookie. His new roommate, Corporal Rodriguez, a young soldier from Minnesota with only 3 years of service, listened silently. Everyone had already been warned about Matson's temper, and no one wanted to be the first to provoke him. Come on, Rodriguez. I don't want to be late on the first day and give these idiots more reason to pick on me, Matson said, heading for the door. Yes, sir, Rodriguez replied, following him. Our first training is hand-to-hand combat with Instructor Reynolds. Matson stopped abruptly. Instructor? A woman is going to teach us how to fight? He let out a short, dry laugh. This has to be a joke. Actually, I heard some veterans talking about her. They say she is ... double quotes. I don't care what they say, Matson interrupted. I've seen this sort of thing before. Some diversity policy puts women in positions they're not qualified for, and we have to pretend it's okay. Rodriguez hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. I don't think that's quite right. They really do seem to respect you. We'll see, Matson replied, already walking toward the training field. We'll see. When they arrived at the designated training field, about 30 soldiers were already lined up. An unusual silence hung in the air, something rare in soldiers gathering. Matson and Rodriguez quickly found their places in the formation. Matson observed that many of the soldiers seemed tense, almost apprehensive. Precisely at 0800, a figure emerged from one of the adjacent buildings. Catherine Reynolds walked with firm steps to the center of the field, positioning herself before the formation. Her gaze methodically swept across the rows of men, assessing each face as if memorizing their feet. Good morning, soldiers, Her voice was clear and firm, highly audible to everyone, despite not being particularly loud. "I'm Sergeant Catherine Reynolds, the lead instructor of hand-to-hand combat technique. Over the next 4 months, you will undergo intensive training under my supervision." Mattson couldn't suppress a disdainful smile. Up close, the instructor seemed even less impressive than he had imagined. Although she was in excellent physical shape, she lacked the muscle mass or stature he associated with a formidable fighter. "Before we begin," Catherine continued, "I want to make it clear that what we teach here is not about brute force. It's about technique, discipline, and control. A soldier who cannot control their emotions on the battlefield is a danger to themselves and their unit." Her gaze lingered momentarily on Mattson, as if she had perceived his expression or read his thoughts. He held her gaze, feeling a growing irritation. "Today, we will conduct an initial assessment of each of your abilities," she continued. "This will allow me to identify specific areas that will need attention, and then move on to simulated combat situations." Immobilization techniques. He deliberately executed the movements with excessive force, causing his partner, a young soldier named Peterson, to groan in pain. "Control, Sergeant Mattson." Catherine's voice sounded behind him. "We're not here to hurt our comrades. The correct technique doesn't require brute force." Mattson turned slowly. "With all due respect, Sergeant, in real combat there is no control. There is survival." A tense silence fell over the group around them. Catherine maintained her neutral expression, but her eyes hardened slightly. "In real combat, Sergeant Mattson, control is exactly what separates a soldier from an assassin. But since you mention real situations," she gestured for the others to step back, creating an open space. "Perhaps we can demonstrate the importance of technique over brute force." Catherine positioned herself in the center of the circle that naturally formed, the soldiers watching with palpable attention. "Sergeant Mattson, would you mind helping me with this demonstration?" It wasn't really a question, and they both knew it. Mattson smiled confidently. This would be his chance to prove his point. "It will be a pleasure, Sergeant," he replied, entering the circle. "The objective is simple," Catherine explained to the group as she positioned herself. "Sergeant Mattson will attempt to immobilize me using any technique he knows. I will demonstrate how the proper technique can neutralize even a physically stronger opponent." The soldiers around exchanged glances. Some seemed worried, others downright curious. The veterans who already knew Catherine seemed almost amused by the situation. Mattson assumed a fighting stance, calculating his approach. Catherine remained relaxed, almost casual, but her eyes were absolutely focused. "When you're ready, Sergeant," she said calmly. Mattson wasted no time. He moved quickly, trying to use his weight and height advantage to dominate the situation immediately. His arms extended to grab Catherine's shoulders, a move that would work against virtually any opponent smaller than him. What happened next was so fast that many soldiers had difficulty processing it. Catherine moved slightly to the side, almost imperceptibly. Her hands found Mattson's wrist and elbow in a precise sequence of movements. Using Mattson's own momentum against him, Catherine executed a perfect leverage technique. Before he could register what was happening, Mattson found himself on his knees, one arm twisted at an uncomfortable angle behind his back, completely immobilized. The movement had been so fluid and efficient that he didn't even have time to resist. "As you can see," Catherine spoke to the group, her breathing perfectly controlled as if she hadn't exerted any effort. "The proper technique allows you to neutralize an opponent regardless of size or strength." Sergeant Mattson gently demonstrated how even someone with considerable combat experience can be vulnerable if they rely solely on brute force. She released Mattson's arm and stepped back a few paces, giving him room to stand. The man's face was red, partly from the effort, mostly from humiliation. His eyes burned with contained anger. "That was luck," he murmured, standing and adjusting his uniform. "I wasn't prepared." Catherine nodded as if considering his argument valid. "Understandable. Let's try again then. This time, be prepared." Mattson narrowed his eyes, already calculating his next approach. This time, he would be more careful. He assumed a defensive stance again, his muscles tense, ready to react to any movement. Catherine waited patiently, When it became clear that Matson was being more cautious, she nodded slightly. "Sometimes in combat, we don't have the luxury of waiting for the perfect moment," she remarked. And then, without any warning, she moved. To the observers, it seemed that Catherine simply flowed around Matson, her movements precise and economical. She easily avoided his attempts to grab her, and when he tried a more aggressive strike, he met only air. The next instant, Catherine was behind him, and precise pressure on a specific point of his neck made Matson's knees buckle again. This time, Catherine didn't prolong the demonstration. She released him almost immediately and retreated, giving him space. "Control isn't just about dominating your opponent," she explained to the group, who now watched in absolute silence. "It's also about dominating yourself, your emotion, your instincts, your pride." Her gaze turned to Matson, who was slowly rising. A soldier who loses control of his emotions in combat has already lost the battle before it even begins. The rest of the session passed without incident, although the tension remained palpable. When Catherine finally dismissed the group, Matson was the first to leave, ignoring the comments and stares of the other soldiers. "You won't believe it if you didn't see it," he heard one of the rookies comment as he walked away. "She took him down like he was a training dummy." Matson clenched his fists, the humiliation fueling his anger. This wasn't over. Not at all. In the days that followed, Matson remained unusually quiet during training. He watched Catherine's every move, every demonstration, every instruction as she conducted the drills. He observed how the other soldiers respected her, how even the toughest veterans followed her instructions without question. And this only increased his frustration. In the mess hall, during dinner on the third day, Rodriguez sat hesitantly at Matson's table. "Sergeant," he greeted cautiously, "the guys are organizing an extra training session tonight. We thought you might want to join us." Matson looked up from his plate. "Extra training in what?" "Combat technique. Some guys are having trouble with that defense sequence Sergeant Reynolds demonstrated today. And why would I want to help those incompetents?" retorted Matson, turning his attention back to his food. Rodriguez hesitated before replying. "Actually, I thought maybe you wanted to practice too. You know, after what happened on the first day. Double." Matson slammed his fork down, making the metal clatter against the tray. "You think I need practice? That I need to learn from that. Double quotes." He interrupted himself, aware of the stares beginning to turn to his table. "That's not what I meant," Rodriguez replied quickly. "It's just that we're all learning new things, and I thought. Double quotes. Think less, soldier," Matson cut in, standing up. "And don't worry about me. I have my own training methods." Leaving Rodriguez behind, Matson left the mess hall. Instead of heading to the barracks, however, he took the path to the main. Night had already fallen, and the area was practically deserted, except for a few soldiers jogging around the outer perimeter as part of their night drills. The administrative building adjacent to the camp still had some lights on. Matson knew that instructors often stayed late preparing the next day's training or evaluating recruits' performance. Perhaps this was his chance for a more private confrontation with Sergeant Reynolds. As he approached the building, he saw a figure emerging from the side door. It was her. Catherine was carrying a small bag of equipment and seemed to be heading to her quarters. Matson quickened his pace, catching up with her before she reached the parking. "Sergeant Reynolds," he called, his voice controlled despite the evident tension. Catherine turned calmly, as if she already knew he was there. Her eyes quickly assessed Matson's posture, noticing the tension in his shoulders and the determination in his gaze. "Sergeant Matson," she replied with a nod. "Can I help you with something?" "Yes, actually you can," he said, moving closer. "I wanted to discuss your teaching methodology. I generally prefer to discuss professional matters during office hours, Sergeant," she replied, showing no discomfort at the proximity. "But if it's urgent, I'm all ears." Matson looked around, noting that they were relatively isolated. "I think you're teaching techniques that are inadequate for real combat situations. Your approach may work in controlled environments, but on the battlefield, double quotes, on the battlefield," Catherine interrupted, her voice firm but calm. "Precisely where I tested each of these techniques. 3 tours in Afghanistan, Sergeant, Special Operations. I'm sure you can check my record." This caught him off guard, though he tried not to show it. Then why insist so much on control? On the front lines, all that matters is neutralizing the enemy, quickly and definitively. Catherine studied him for a moment before replying, "Control is what sets us apart from the enemy, Sergeant. It's what allows us to make split-second judgments that can mean the difference between neutralizing a real threat or making a mistake you'll carry with you forever." She paused, her gaze intensifying. "But I have the impression that it's not really my teaching methodology that bothers you, is it?" Matson felt his face heat up. "You humiliated me in front of those men. Deliberately. I offered a practical demonstration of a technique," she replied calmly. "If you felt humiliated, perhaps you should reflect on why. You knew exactly what you were doing," he insisted, his voice lowering a tone laden with contained anger. "You chose me specifically because you knew my history, because you wanted to prove some point about emotional control." Catherine didn't deny the accusation. Instead, she carefully placed her bag on the floor and turned completely to face him. "Your history precedes you, Sergeant Matson. I know about the incident that brought you here. I know about your temper and your tendency to resolve conflicts with your fists." His voice remained professional, without judgment. "And yes, I chose you for that demonstration because I needed to. Establish something important not just for you, but for all the men in that field." Matson stepped forward, deliberately encroaching on her personal space. It was an intimidation tactic that had worked countless times before, using his stature to physically dominate a situation. "And what exactly did you need to establish?" he asked, his voice almost a growl. Catherine didn't back down an inch. Her eyes remained fixed on his, without fear or hesitation. "That no one in this field, not even you, is above the control and discipline that are the foundation of what we do," she replied. "That strength without technique is useless, and that underestimating an opponent based on prejudice is the first step to." For a tense moment, they stood there, just inches apart. Matson could feel his breath quickening, the familiar heat of anger rising up his neck. It would be so easy to seize her now, to show who really had the upper hand when there was no audience, when she wasn't prepared. As if reading his thoughts, Catherine spoke softly. "You're at a crossroads, Sergeant. What you do in the next few seconds will define the rest of your military career. Choose wisely." It was like a bucket of cold water. Matson blinked, suddenly aware of where he was, of what he was about to do. His breathing was still rapid, but the fog of anger began to dissipate. Slowly, he took a step back. Catherine watched him intently, then nodded once, as if approving his decision. "That, Sergeant, is control. And it's the first real step in your..." She bent down to pick up her bag. "Tomorrow, 0600, at the auxiliary field, before regular training. If you're really interested in honing your combat skills, I'll be there for a one-on-one session." Without waiting for a reply, she turned and continued on her way to the parking lot, leaving Matson alone with his turbulent thoughts. For long minutes, he remained motionless, his heart still pounding in his chest. Part of him wanted to follow Catherine, to demand that she not treat him like a novice who needed private lessons. But another part, a part he rarely listened to, recognized the opportunity being offered. Finally, he took a deep breath and began walking back to the barrack. His mind was filled with conflicting thoughts, but a decision had already been made. Tomorrow, 0600, he would be at the auxiliary camp. Dawn still dominated Fort Hood when Matson arrived at the auxiliary. The sky was beginning to lighten on the horizon, but the stars were still visible. The air was surprisingly cool, a brief relief before the relentless heat that would come with the day. To his surprise, Catherine was already there, executing a series of fluid movements that he recognized as an ancient form of martial art. Each gesture was precise, controlled, almost hypnotic in its grace and efficiency. She was so engrossed that she didn't seem to notice his immediate arrival. Matson remained silent, observing. There was something almost reverent in the way she moved, as if each gesture were not just physical exercise, but a form of meditation. For the first time, he allowed himself to see beyond his initial preconception, recognizing that he was in the presence of someone with genuine mastery. When Catherine finished the sequence of movements, she turned directly to him, without any sign of surprise. "Punctuality Another essential quality for a soldier, she commented, breathless despite the intense exercise. "Good morning, Sergeant." "Good morning, Sergeant Reynolds," he replied, still a little uncertain about how to proceed. "What was that you were doing?" "A form of Tai Chi," she explained, taking a towel to wipe the sweat from her face. "It helps to center the mind and body before intense physical training." She paused, studying him. "Have you ever practiced any traditional martial arts?" Matson shook his head. "Just standard army training and a few boxing lessons." "That explains your style," she said without any derogatory tone, direct, aggressive, efficient in its own way. She gestured for him to move closer to the center. "But today, we're going to expand your repertoire for the next 2 hours." Catherine led Matson through a training regimen unlike anything he had ever There were no powerful strikes or brutal submission technique. Instead, she emphasized economy of movement, reading the opponent, utilizing the opponent's energy. At first, Matson instinctively resisted the approach, trying to impose his natural strength. But with each failed attempt, with each movement neutralized with apparent ease by Catherine, he began to realize the limitations of his own style. "You're overthinking," Catherine observed, after a particularly unsuccessful sequence. "Your body is still fighting the new movement, wanting to revert to what it knows. It's hard to unlearn habits," Matson admitted, breathing heavily. "I'm not asking you to unlearn," she corrected him. "I'm suggesting you expand, integrate, don't replace." She demonstrated a redirection technique again, this time more slowly. "See how I'm not directly resisting your force. I'm acknowledging it, respecting it, and then redirecting it, like water flowing around a stone." Matson tried again, this time focusing less on mastering and more on feeling the flow of movement. To his surprise, the technique began to make sense on a deeper level. As the sun was high in the sky, marking the end of their private session, Catherine finally gestured for them to stop. "You learn fast when you allow yourself to learn, Sergeant," she commented, handing him a bottle of water. "It has potential for much more than brute force." Matson accepted the water, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was, not just physically, but mentally. The training had demanded a level of concentration and self-control he rarely employed. "Why are you doing this?" he asked after a few sips. "Why bother with private training after the way I behave?" Catherine studied him for a moment before answering. "Because I recognize something in you that perhaps you yourself don't see," she said finally. "An exceptional soldier hidden beneath layers of anger and impulsiveness. And it would be a waste to let that go to waste." She began to gather her equipment. "Besides, I've seen many good men destroy their careers and their lives by failing to control their impulses. Some of them could have been saved if someone had intervened at the right moment." There was something in the way she said it, a momentary shadow in her eyes that suggested to Matson she was speaking from personal experience. For the first time, he felt genuine curiosity about her story. "Same time tomorrow?" Catherine asked, interrupting his thoughts. Matson nodded, surprising himself with the speed of his response. "I'll be here." The morning sessions became a routine in the following. Each morning, Matson arrived at the auxiliary camp to find Catherine already in the midst of her preparatory exercises. Each day, he learned something new, not just about combat technique, but about mental discipline, about the connection between body and mind, about how true strength came from control, not domination. In regular training sessions with the rest of the group, the change in Matson was subtle but noticeable. He was still intense, still competitive, but the sharp edge of his aggression had softened. He began to help the less experienced soldiers, sharing what he would, gradually becoming a respected presence rather than a feared one. Rodriguez was the first to notice the change, commenting during a training break, "Something's happened to you, Sergeant. You're different." Matson just shrugged, but couldn't help but smile slightly. "Just expanding my repertoire." So the big test came 6 weeks after the start of his private training, when Catherine announced a simulated competition. The soldiers would be divided into pairs for a series of controlled fights, with the winners advancing until only one champion remained. "The goal isn't to hurt your opponent," Catherine explained to the assembled group. "It's to demonstrate control, technique, and adaptability. Real combat is unpredictable. You need to be prepared to adjust your approach as needed." When the pairings were announced, Matson discovered that his first opponent would be Peterson, the same soldier he had been overly aggressive with on his first day of training. The young soldier looked visibly nervous as he positioned himself before Matson. "Relax, soldier," Matson said quietly as they awaited the signal to begin. "We're not here to hurt comrades, remember?" The look of surprise on Peterson's face almost made Matson laugh. How strange it was to be on the other side now, repeating the words Catherine had used with. The fight was brief but instructive. Matson could have used his physical advantage to quickly dominate, but instead, he chose a more technical approach, giving Peterson room to demonstrate his own skills. When he finally immobilized the young soldier, it was with a precise and controlled movement that Catherine had taught him just 2 days before. "Good fight," he said, helping Peterson to his feet. Across the field, Catherine watched with a slight smile of approval. Matson advanced round after round, facing increasingly challenging. In each fight, he demonstrated not only strength and skill, but a newfound ability to to adapt, to find the perfect balance between aggression and control. In the final, he faced Rodriguez, the only other undefeated competitor. The young corporal had surprised everyone with his speed and impeccable technique, compensating for his lack of brute strength with tactical intelligence. "I'm not going to go easy on you just because we share a room," Matson warned, a defiant smile on his face. "I wouldn't expect less, Sergeant," Rodriguez replied, assuming his fighting stance. The fight that followed was the longest and most intense of the tournament. Rodriguez was fast, almost impossible to grab, slipping from Matson's blows like water. But Matson had learned patience, had learned to wait for the right moment instead of forcing an opening. When she finally saw her opportunity, an almost imperceptible pattern in Rodriguez's movement, Matson acted with surgical precision. A subtle redirection, a strategic imbalance, and Rodriguez found himself on the ground, not quite understanding how he had gotten there. A momentary silence filled the field, followed by spontaneous applause from the other soldiers. Matson extended her hand, helping Rodriguez to his feet. "That," said Catherine, approaching the two, "is what we call mastery." She gestured for the soldiers to gather. Sergeant Matson demonstrated something fundamental today, that the true strength of a warrior lies not in their ability to dominate by force, but in their ability to control every aspect of their being in combat, physical and mental. She turned to Matson, extending her hand. "Congratulations, Sergeant! Well-deserved victory." When Matson shook her hand, she felt something she hadn't expected, a genuine respect, not just for her title or rank, but for who she was as a soldier and instructor. "Naquila noite, enquanto os soldados celebravam o fim do torneo, no refeitorio, Matson encont. Catherine sentada, sozinha em uma mesa afastada, revisando algumas anataques. Posso-me juntar a voca, sargento?" Pergunta ele. Catherine indicou a cadeira vazia à sua frente. "Avanti, por alguns momentos, ficaram em silêncio confortável. Finalmente, Matson falou, queria agradecer. Neo apenas pelas sessões de treinamento, mas bem por neo desistia de mim no primeiro dia." Catherine Gardus was anata. "Nunca desisto de soldado competente, Matson, specialmente quando vejo alguém lutando contra si mesmo mais do que contra qualquer inimigo externo. Licento, reconhecendo a verdade em suas palavras. Voca mencionou uma vez sobre ter visto bons homens destruírem suas carreiras por falta de controle. Parecia pessoal. Catherine o observou por a momento, como se decidindo quanto revelar. "Meu irmã mais valio", disse ela finalmente. "Tamba militar, temperamento explosivo, assim como voca. Excelente soldado, quando conseguia ser controller. O que aconteceu com ele?" Perguntou Matson, sentindo que já sabia a resposta. "Court marcial, desonra, agora, trabalha como segurança, shopping em Ohio. Ela fez uma pausa, tente ajuda, mas ele não estava pronto para ouvir. Não como voca estava." Matson absorveu a informação, compreendendo melhor a motivação por tia. "Estou interesse dela em seu desenvolvimento. Bem, agradeço por ter tentado comigo." "Não agradeço ainda," respondeu ela com pequeno ceris, su trinamento esta lunge determinia, 600, amanu, mesmalugar, nihil perderia, porinata, respondu L, surpriend endosec calm, a sinceridade m sua propria voz, quando Catherine se, levantu parasea, Matson no te algo que havia escapado a sua atencao durante todas as semanas de treinamento intenso. Havia uma cicatriz quase imperceptible na base de su pescoço, o tipo de marca que es poderia ter vindo de combate intenso. El subitamente se lembru das rumores sobre ela, sobre as historias de suas facanjas no afeganisto, na poca, havia, descartado, como exagerax, mas agora, Sargentu Reynolds, Shamu Elianti, Q. LSA, Afastas, Acalis Historias, Sobra Voca, Ter Neutralizado 5, Insurgentes Cezina para Protegar Sua Unidite, Snow Verdaderas, Catherine Peru, Ohando Opor Chima du Pora Momento, Matson Pensu Q. Ella Neo Respondaria, Forum Cs, Naverdide, Dis Ella Finalmente, Comum Leave, Darda Omero, Como se comentes, Sabra o clima. IEU now estava, Cezinha, Tinha mu, Trenimento comigo, antes Matson pudas responder, ella J havia severado e kami hava, diarca, aceda. Dexando.com, novo nivel de respeto, e uma lico, que sabia que, caraguria, pela resto, de sua carreira, que a verdadeira forca nunca, Astive no volume, devasso u na, intensidade do golpe, mas na capacidade de manter, o control, quando todos, o redor, o perdium, no dias aguinti, esluem ponto, Matson estava, no campo auxiliar, executandos movie, tos fluidos, de tai chi q, Catherine Havia Ensenado, preparando su corpo isua, ment para o proxino, nivel de su tenimento, finalmente entendendo que o maior adversario que jami, on fronteira now era a instructora, de combate og qualquer inimigo externo, mas as tempestades dentro de se mesmo.